1966's Evil Brain from Outer Space is a made-up movie. That's not to say that this film doesn't exist. If it didn't, this would be a ridiculously short review, but rather that it was never intended to be released as a feature-length movie. You see, what we have here with Evil Brain from Outer Space is a freakish chimera of a movie cobbled together from a series of Japanese serialisations that played as B-pictures in cinemas. In the same way that Superman and Flash Gordon had serials that played in US theatres before the main feature. This series was known in Japan as Sūpā Jaiantsu, and it ran between 1957 and 1959 under Shin Toho, the non-unionised branch of Toho Films. They'd quite often film on Toho sets out of hours and shoot things on the down low to make a bit of extra cash. It stars the titular Sūpā Jaiantsu, an alien from space who's a quasi-Superman-style figure who hangs around on Earth fighting crime. They made 9 episodes of this serialisation. 6 of them were 2-part stories, with the first part ending in peril and the second part resuming where the first part left off and then resolving. The last 3 episodes of this series, however, were all standalone stories that ran slightly longer than the first 6, but tied everything up at the end rather than leading to a cliffhanger. In 1963, an American company called Walter Manley Enterprise purchased the international distribution rights to Sūpā Jaiantsu via their media branch Medallion Films. Serialisations like this were kind of on the way out at the time, or at least they weren't as popular as they once were. So they decided, rather than just dubbing Sūpā Jaiantsu and shoving it out the door to scrape what money they could, they instead recut the 9 films into 4 feature-length movies. These were Atomic Rulers of the World, Invaders from Space, Attack from Space, and today's film. And I really wish that I'd known this before I decided to jump into the last part of a quadrilogy first. Not that it particularly matters, as apart from our main hero, Sūpā Jaiantsu, localised to Starman in the US, no, not that one, all the films are pretty much self-contained and don't reference each other really. You could realistically watch these in any order and it wouldn't really make any difference. So, Evil Brain from Outer Space is a supercut of the final 3 serialisations in the Sūpā Jaiantsu series. And if you remember earlier, I said that the last 3 parts were all self-contained and didn't interconnect. So how were they able to cut 3 movies that had no links to each other at all other than the main hero into one coherent movie? Well, the answer is they forced a narrative that makes absolutely no sense through really bad dubbing and hard cuts. And then when it failed to pick up a cinema release, they dumped it in a kids slot on television between 1964 and 1966. God, this one's a mess. So, Evil Brain from Outer Space opens in outer space, with a narrator who'll be joining us for most of the movie to help smooth over the cracks in the edit and to explain vast swathes of the made-up plot that they couldn't afford to reshoot. He explains that out in space, several societies have been able to craft fully autonomous robots that can blend into society with great ease, and that these robots, while largely harmless, have also occasionally corrupted into becoming assassins due to their blending in abilities. And one of these robot assassins has just assassinated the galaxy's smartest being, an alien by the name of Balazar. With his final ounce of strength, Balazar designs and engineers a chassis to house his brain, and with a small army of henchmen, Balazar the Killer Brain heads out into the solar system to seek vengeance and universal conquest. Balazar's plans vary from planet to planet, but the general plan is usually to remove a planet's world leaders and irradiate and exterminate the planet while chaos reigns, leaving large parts of the galaxy as a no-go radioactive slag heap. And he's got his tiny mind's eye set on Earth next. A council is drawn from survivors of the destroyed planets alongside current residents of a planet simply known as the Emerald Planet to discuss how they can prevent Earth from becoming just another statistic. And after some delegation, they arrive at a relatively simple solution. They'll find an alien who looks closest to being human and gift him with the power of a globe meter. a wristwatch that allows the wearer to fly, makes them immune from all levels of radiation, and grants them the ability to talk in an unlimited number of universal languages. The plan is to send this alien to Earth, have him blend in with the population, and when trouble appears, suit up, kick ass, and save the day. And they settle on the mighty Starman, who they feel looks like the perfect example of how a human would dress and speak. So, they stick a watch on him, punt him into space, and a short while later, he's on Earth. He arrives on Earth just in time to learn of a rather mysterious bank robbery. The thief didn't steal any money, just a briefcase. While being chased, the robber dropped the briefcase into a river, and when questioned about the contents, all he can say is that it contained a brain. While the interrogations continue, the detective involved receives a call from a Dr. Kurakawa, who basically informs them that the thief is in fact clinically insane and that he should be released back into his care as soon as possible, as he doesn't want the detectives to waste any more time interrogating a crazy person. Once released, the thief goes to look for the briefcase, but instead finds some henchmen of Balazar waiting for him. They take him to a nearby woods where a fight breaks out, but Starman flies into the rescue, and as thanks for saving him from the henchmen, the thief fills Starman in on what's happened. It turns out that Balazar's goons have been stationed in key locations across the Earth and are planning a primary attack on the planet imminently. He also tells Starman about the powers of Balazar. He's allegedly indestructible, so Starman goes to a doctor and good ally, Dr. Sakurai, for help in finding a way to defeat this nefarious brain. Sakurai suggests that the only likely way to beat Balazar would be to develop some kind of chemical that would dissolve it, but that this chemical may take some time to create. It's literally that vague. Meanwhile, Balazar's goons get good news that he's been found safe and well, and he's quickly moved to a secret underground compound where, shock horror, and spoilers, it's revealed that Dr. Kurakawa is actually working for Balazar. Well, it's soft revealed about 20 minutes in, and then it's 100% confirmed in the closing moments of the film. But to be honest, from the moment you realise that Kurakawa is faking being in a wheelchair and that he has a secret underground lair, you know something isn't right. And from there, the film basically falls into a bit of a repetitive loop. Generally centred around some kids or a detective snooping in on something they shouldn't, getting in a bit of a tight spot, Starman flies in and stops the kids or detective from getting hurt, and together they investigate whatever it was the goons were doing, which leads them to a mutant, generally created by Balazar to protect a base. These mutants don't really act like end-level bosses, however, due to the nature of how this has been edited together. Instead, they kind of dip in and out throughout the film and don't really have a lot of major impact other than giving Starman someone to fight periodically. And at the end of each fight, Starman generally gets a clue to the location of a goon hideout where he'll beat up the goons, the police raid the place, next hideout, next ass kicking. That's literally the rest of this movie. Spoilers ahead, as if that matters. I'm going to take a minute here and let you guess how long it is into the film before you get to see the great and mythical Balazar. Do you reckon he turns up 20 minutes in? 30? Surely not 60 minutes in. Well, you'd be wrong on all counts. Balazar turns up on screen at 1 hour and 15 minutes into this film. And he's on screen for no longer than a minute and a half, and this film's 1 hour and 18 minutes long. Well, surely it doesn't matter how long he's on screen for as long as he leaves an impression and looks cool, right? Well, he certainly does leave an impression, but it's far from a good one. In fact, I'd be hard-pressed to say he looks anything like an alien brain or otherwise. He looks like a recycled shot of some mould from an earlier scene in the film. To say this movie was a damp squib is an understatement. This film's payoff is literally non-existent. But in many ways that could be put down to the source material that this movie is made up of. So, this movie comprises material from films 7, 8 and 9 of the Sūpā Jaiantsu series. Episode 7 was originally called The Space Mutant Appears, which focuses on a brain-like alien creature that's created by a mad scientist and an evil alien army to cause trouble. It originally ran to 45 minutes. Episode 8 was called The Devil's Incarnation and is about a mad scientist who uses science and sorcery to transform his dead daughter into a murderous evil witch. And that one ran for 57 minutes. And episode 9, The Poison Moth Kingdom, has Starman fighting against an army of Arab terrorists, which are plotting to assassinate a crown prince for his riches. Again, this one runs to about 57 minutes as well. And the biggest problem this film has is that all three of these films have almost identical narrative tropes, meaning that beyond the stuff that's made up for this movie specifically, Balazar, the Space Armada, Balazar's goons, this film feels like Groundhog Day, and beyond the opening 15 minutes, it very quickly fits into an inconsistent and messy rut from which it never really recovers. All the cool brain aliens, witches and alien henchmen are just simplified down to mutants in this movie, and they're used incredibly erratically, like the brain alien from episode 7 is just dropped in randomly when the editors seemingly get bored. The witch is only on screen for about 10 to 15 minutes collectively and does nothing, and the Arab prince storyline from episode 9 is reworked into a very tonally out of place 15-minute side story about some mutants attempting an assassination on a world leader that quickly falls apart. I feel like, on their own, taken as individual works with a bit of breathing space between them, they'd probably be fine, if not pretty good. But edited together into this incoherent mess, it's almost unwatchable. The pacing's all over the place, tonally it jumps from monotonous plodding to proto-Batman 66 style campness. There's no 3-act structure because the repetition just means that predictable stuff happens over and over again. Starman must destroy an evil hideout at least 4 times in this movie from my count. They introduce a ton of characters, some of whom are only introduced to be gone and forgotten after their one scene. There's a cavalcade of detectives and doctors who I very quickly lost track of, and while the campy moments are good fun and entertaining in and of themselves, that doesn't salvage this film from being an absolute car crash mishmash of thoughts and ideas that just left me desperately wondering why they even bothered assembling this. I appreciate that serialisations were on the way out at the time. Given that World War II was still within living memory at this point, Japanese serialisations would have probably been even more unaccepted because, you know, racism. But this really does feel like they needed to justify using every scrap of footage they owned. It's a pretty unwatchable mess. Which is a real shame, because the Direction and Cine in and of itself is pretty nice. These films do have a bit of that early Toho magic behind them in places, but it's a messy final product, and that's because one of the things I should point out is that all 3 of these films were shot completely differently. With episode 7 being the last of this series to be filmed in full screen, episode 8 being the first one to be filmed in colour, and episode 9 going back to black and white and being the first in the series to be filmed in widescreen. Now, that may not mean much to your average moviegoer, but the format you choose to shoot your film in literally decides how your direction is going to work. So to have all 3 of your movies shot using completely different styles and conditions, but then having to edit all 3 in a non-linear way where shots from the colour film interact with shots from the full screen and widescreen film, well, it's a mess. Again, it definitely has its moments. Some of the fight scenes, particularly the ones around the fairground and the ones with the brain alien, are great, and really ooze that cheesy 50s B-movie style. But the rest? It looks and feels like a Japanese TV production, with the odd big-budget moment thrown in. Which, given that this was predominantly shot on 35mm film and was aimed at cinema goers, is a damning criticism against the distributors. This was written by Ichiro Miyagawa. He had 51 writing credits under his belt and seemed to generally write dramas, samurai movies and gangster films. But with such a vast list of credits, and from what I can make of the Supergiant series in general, it looks like this was arguably one of his more favourable credits. He sadly passed away in 2008, but he's left behind a massive backlog to explore, which I may well look into someday. On directing duties, we have Koriyoshi Akasaka, Tero Ishii, and Akira Mitsuya. I'm sure I've massacred all of those. For both Koriyoshi and Akira, they have 5 directing credits, almost all from the mid-1960s and almost all of them for gangster and samurai type movies. And that's about it. As for Tero, well, they have 93 directing credits, predominantly for action and gangster movies, but there is the odd horror and sci-fi flick thrown into the mix. They seem by far to be the most qualified in this regard, and at this point they'd had a fair few credits under their belt so far. So while I don't want to say that maybe the better elements of the direction in this movie were their doing, it probably was. Tero unfortunately passed away in 2005. The performances in this one are stiff. They're 50s TV stiff. Most of the cast walk around the sets like it's a theatre production with little to no physical animation in their performances, and when this is the kind of thing they've got to act against, well, it's clear to see why there isn't a lot of life in the place on the acting front. Frustrating things further here, the dub for the US adaptation is a bit questionable to say the least. The US voice actors have decided to give these Japanese actors Japanese accents, and these range from almost non-existent to an almost painfully racist caricature that left me collar-tugging. Because I can't hear the original performance, it's made it difficult to say whether they were all overall bad or good. I'd say this film is very much of its time on that front. It's not the absolute worst I've ever seen from B-movies of the 1950s and 60s, but it's definitely on the lower end of the wedge. The only window into the thoughts and feelings of the original Starman cast are from Starman himself, Ken Utsui, who said that he hated playing the role right up until his death, and would constantly play it down whenever he was asked about it. He said that part of the reason he didn't like to talk about it was that he was embarrassed by the costume. In particular, the fact that the costume had a stuffed crotch, as apparently the producers believed that women would go to see a movie with a well-endowed man. So if Starman himself hated the Starman movies, what hope have I got? I've ragged on about the script a ton in this review, but I also need to say that part of the reason this movie is such a hot mess is down to the editing, which is just all over the place. As mentioned earlier, these 3 shorts ran collectively to 159 minutes, but in order to maintain Medallion's weird request for killer brain aliens, it means a ton of footage had to be junked from all 3 movies, and big chunks of parts 7 and 8 had to be transplanted into each other and episode 9 in order to maintain continuity. The result is that 159 minutes of footage got shrunk down to 78 minutes. And this means a lot of important scene construction was removed and instead, shall we say, creative hard cuts had to be implemented. Usually during scenes that really don't have much purpose to help create some sense of narrative cohesion later on in the film. The worst and most noticeable example being a train crash scene from episode 7 that's randomly inserted into episode 8 with no context, no explanation, and much later down the line is offhandedly remarked upon as being another mutant attack. But if you're coming to the film for the first time, this event happens before mutants are really even widely talked about. So there's just this random 3-minute interlude in the film where a demon attacks a train, and as the audience, you have no idea why this is happening, what the demon is, and why it's attacking the train for seemingly no reason. And stuff like that is really common in this movie. It really does feel like the copies of these 3 films were dumped on some poor editor on a wet weekend, and that he was told to have a movie ready by Monday. Nothing sits flush, it feels like a car built out of random junkyard scrap. And it's frustrating to see what are individually seemingly okay movies get butchered together so ham-fistedly. On a final note, the soundtrack has a weird journey too. So in the original format, all these shorts had custom compositions, actual original music. I don't know what they sounded like because none of the shorts have ever been released in any other format other than these movies. But for some reason, the international distribution either didn't include the music, or Medallion Films chose to get rid of the original music because everything here is just stock tracks. Just the most bland of early 50s twangy sci-fi music and string arrangements. And it sounds awful. It's boring, uninspiring, and for the most part notable only by its absence in scenes that desperately needed something to pep them up a bit. Evil Brain from Outer Space was initially run on American television in syndication from 1966 through to the early mid-70s. After that, it drifted into relative obscurity until it finally fell into the public domain at some point in the mid to late 90s. It never had a UK VHS, DVD or Blu-ray release, however in the US it was distributed by Something Weird Video on VHS in the early to mid-90s, and it finally saw a release on DVD in 2002. And since then it's been re-released multiple times by multiple different companies looking to cash in on its public domain status. My version comes courtesy of Mill Creek Entertainment's Nightmare Worlds collection, but it's been featured on many other Mill Creek sets too. At the time of recording, I can't find any evidence to suggest a Blu-ray release, but never say never. Evil Brain from Outer Space is a mind-numbing cash-in movie. That's all there is to it. A company bought some rights to a serialized set of movies thinking it was a good idea at the time. The bottom fell out of the market, so they tried to salvage what they could with disastrous results. While it has the odd spot of good cine and direction and the occasional unintentionally funny camp moment, it's just a total mess of a feature. I'd love to see the original unedited versions with subtitles, just to see exactly what I'm missing, because I really feel like with all the distribution gubbins taken out of this, it could be a quite fun series. But as it is, it's really not worth your time or effort. There are way better bad movies out there and way more entertaining ways to spend your time.